What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you the final installment of our rankings videos we do over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel. So if you're making it to this video, we are going to be talking about the top 5 tight ends with a couple sleepers at the end in the 2021 NFL Draft. If you guys have made it this far in the series, you would have already seen our quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. We are finally finishing off the series with these tight ends. And a lot of people on Twitter in the fantasy football industry will talk about the number one name on our list. We're here to provide context and really the games of the rest of the top 5 and a few other guys afterwards. But that being said, Corey, how you doing today?
Yeah, we really haven't talked about tight ends at all on our channel because, I mean, they're the unsung heroes of fantasy, right? Like we know that the sexy positions are the running backs and the wide receivers, and then super flex leagues, the quarterbacks. Tight ends are kind of hung out to dry because for the most part, there's only like 15 good tight ends in the NFL, and then the rest of them kind of stink. But there's some good tight end prospects in this class, and we're going to get into some of them, what they do well, how their kind of fantasy outlooks are shaping up. But obviously, yeah, you mentioned Kyle Pitts. Everyone knows he's going to be our number one tight end. But before we get into the actual rankings part, we're going to hit the intro. Okay, so as I just mentioned, Kyle Pitts is our number one tight end. Anybody who doesn't have Kyle Pitts as their number one tight end needs to not be someone that you actually listen to for advice, because as much as I do like these other guys, there's like nobody that's even in the stratosphere of Kyle Pitts. And if you told me to stack up previous draft classes that I've watched since I've been kind of evaluating players, I haven't seen a tight end prospect like Kyle Pitts since I've been watching tight ends since, I don't know, 2016, 2017. OJ Howard is the closest thing I've seen to an elite tight end prospect like Kyle Pitts, and he wasn't even on Kyle Pitts' level. So Kyle Pitts, tight end from Florida, if you don't know what school he went to, there's 6 traits that we talk about for every position, right? We talk about them for quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. For tight ends, they're pretty similar to wide receivers because they do a lot of the same things. The only difference is for both positions, they both need to be able to separate, catch the ball, provide yards after the catch, some versatility and downfield ability as well. Good athleticism, and then finally for tight ends specifically, they need to be able to block as well. So those are kind of the 6 traits that we look for when we're evaluating tight ends. And me and you, Danny, we can kind of just go rapid fire on Kyle Pitts one after another. But let's start with separation because, I mean, there's no way that a tight end of the size of Kyle Pitts should be able to move the way he does. He is fluid as hell. He runs and cuts like a big wide receiver. You're going to hear the term big wide receiver to describe Kyle Pitts a lot. But the problem, or not the problem with it, but the difference between a big wide receiver prospect, like an Evan Ingram, for example, is about 3 inches of height and about 25 pounds of weight. Like Kyle Pitts is a prototypical tight end size, yet he actually does look like a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch Kyle Pitts on film, you're like, that guy is 6'6", 250, because the way he moves is just different than anybody else on the field. You mentioned his separation and route running. This is a guy at that size is the most fluid, nuanced tight end I have ever watched in college football. And quite frankly, you mentioned this might be the best tight end prospect since 2016, 2015, since you started doing this. This may be the best overall receiving prospect I have ever watched. Given his role, given his versatility, given his fluidity at that amount of size and that amount of athleticism, Kyle Pitts does it all. And you mentioned we're going to mention too, the production was amazing. Amazing. And it's not just a product of, oh, well, that offense is there. He had a bunch of, no. Kyle Pitts was doing things at a collegiate level that, quite frankly, the only other prospect I can even think of that comes to mind, even in the same breath as Kyle Pitts, and I was way too young to even analyze this, would be Vernon Davis. That is how special Kyle Pitts is in comparison to the rest of the tight ends that have come out in recent years.
Yeah, and when we think about Kyle Pitts, obviously separation, we always talk about the metrics to use to evaluate separation. Yards per route run of 3.26, which was number 1 by far at the tight end position in this class. And it was actually top 8 among wide receivers in this class. And that includes guys like Dwayne Eskridge, who had like 30 targets. So this is a dude that could get it done on the outside. He was used a lot on the outside. Quarterback rating of 146.2 when targeted for a guy that got 65 targets this year is an insane number. Like, we can't stress this point home. a lot of the talk around rookie drafts, right, is going to devalue Kyle Pitts because he's a tight end, right? That's just what is going to happen because the tight end position is really not that important in fantasy. But the problem is that Kyle Pitts is such a unicorn to the point that you can't really treat him like a tight end because the NFL team that drafts him in the top 8 picks, which is like his floor, is not going to treat him like a traditional tight end. They're not just going to stick him in line and make him run every tight end route in the book. They're going to use him as a smart weapon, and it's pretty dumb to assume that most of the time. But with Kyle Pitts, I think you can assume that because that is how he was used at Florida already.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like Kyle Pitts, the way he was used at Florida will be how an NFL team attacks him. Because let's be honest here, you turn on a Florida game, you see this guy all over the field. You see this guy making plays in the air. You see this guy making plays after the catch, as we're going to mention. This is just the most dynamic, versatile threat at the tight end position that has come out in recent memory. You mentioned, again, the yards per route run, ridiculous. And 146.2 when targeted for a tight end makes no sense.
Like, yeah, especially a tight end that got that much volume too, because sometimes like that number could be skewed if you only got like 20 targets and you made like one big play happen. But yeah, like separation, this guy can get open. Once he gets open too, he ain't dropping it. 65 targets this year, 0 drops, and some that he shouldn't have caught too. Like he has a number of plays where he's climbing the ladder and just absolutely taking one off of someone's helmet. Like he has mitts that attached to his arms because he had nearly 11-inch hands. He is like freakish size. So this is a guy that like the normal job of a tight end, normal tight ends, not Kyle Pitts. Your job is to usually get open around like where the sticks are, catch the ball, fall down, get the first down, right? He can offer you that, but he offers so much more. We're going to get into yards after the catch right now. Yeah. What he provides after the catch is unlike any tight end in the NFL, really. Like George Kittle obviously provides this. A lot of these like freakish, Darren Waller, even like a guy like Noah Fant who just came into the league. These are the type of dudes that can provide the ability after the catch that Kyle Pitts has because of the speed, athleticism, elusiveness combination that Kyle Pitts possesses. He was able to register 6 yards after catch per reception, which is very impressive when you actually watch his film and look how he was deployed. Because if you watch someone like Brevin Jordan, for example, who we're going to get into, he was used in ways that would facilitate yards after the catch. He was used on bubble screens and drag routes and option plays and stuff. Kyle Pitts was used downfield like a majority of the time. So the fact that he was able to register 6 yards after the catch per reception on the routes that he was running is super impressive.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that yards after the catch over 6 is just insane to think about, given that, as you mentioned, he was used down the field. He was used 15 yards, 20 yards down the field, and he was still able to provide that much of yards after catch per reception. You mentioned it. We alluded to it. The versatility that he had down the field. He had 17 deep targets
out of his 65,
which in comparison to his teammate Kadarius Toney was more than him.
I think Toney had 9.
331 deep receiving yards and 5 deep touchdowns. It's just insane to think that a guy of this yards after catch ability was still being used down the field, still being deployed in high point verticality situations, was still being used as that absolute bailout option by Kyle Trask, which you've seen if you watch the film multiple times. Kyle Trask would huck up a prayer to freaking Kyle Pitts, and he's coming down it with 3 defenders draped at his hips. That is how talented he is when the ball is in the air. And quite frankly, this is not a guy that you're just going to line up in line, because he did also have 14 slot targets and 2.2 yards per route run out of the slot. So make no mistake.
On the outside too. They used him all over the place, and honestly, he could throw him in the backfield just to be like honest. There's nothing you can't do with this guy. Like, as we mentioned, I'll touch on his athleticism real quick. He ran a 4.44 at 248 pounds or 245 pounds, a weight-adjusted speed score of 126. Jonathan Taylor's weight-adjusted speed score is 117, which is like Kyle Pitts' weight-adjusted speed score is 100th percentile. It's like the best that probably at the top of any database that you're going to find. And not only that, but he was like 60th plus percentile, 70th percentile in like every agility drill, all the jumps. They aren't built like Kyle Pitts very often. From athleticism standpoint, O.J. Howard is probably the closest comparison of an athlete at the tight end position, but the film is just so tremendous with Kyle Pitts as well. And not only that, but this guy can block. Like, he can actually block. He has 100% pass blocking efficiency in this class and a top 5 run blocking grade. So this is a complete player. He's the reason that you hear guys like Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper say that they're like their number 2 player Kyle Pitts is their number 2 player in this draft, it's because they've been doing this a long time and they haven't seen a guy like this either. This is a special prospect. We're going to, like, we talk about special traits all the time. This guy's got a lot of them, and he is not getting past pick 4 to 8 in the NFL draft.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if you guys want a reference of how feared upon he was by opposing college defenses, if you all know who J.C. Horn is, cornerback from South Carolina, a highly regarded top 3 overall cornerback in this class and projected top 15 overall pick, guess who he was deployed on in the Florida game? Take a wild guess.
Yeah, he got absolutely baptized.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just goes to show that this is a team that had another top 50 overall prospect at the receiver position, but when the top 15 overall player at corner came across them, he was deployed on Kyle Pitts. You have to respect Kyle Pitts. You have to get your best player on Kyle Pitts. South Carolina did exactly that, and he still put up like 4 for 57 and 2 touchdown stat line on him.
Yeah, and how many defensive backs can cover this dude in the NFL? Like Derwin James? Like, is that it?
Maybe.
Like that's the type of player you need to defend
Minka?
because Jamal Adams would get destroyed by this dude. Like it's
maybe
not
Minka?
Yeah, maybe Minka Fitzpatrick. Like, you need a guy with size. You could probably put Jalen Ramsey on him, to be honest, because he's like a big corner, but this is a special prospect. So we'll stop talking about Kyle Pitts. If you guys are wondering, if you have a rookie draft, how high should I draft this guy? In a 1 quarterback super flex league, I would not be surprised. Like, I wouldn't blame anybody for taking him within the top 3 or 5 picks. And then in a super flex league, I would probably also not blame anyone if they wanted to take him top 6, top 8.
Yeah, no, definitely. He is well worth that pick. And if he, again, you mentioned in that top 4 to 8 range in the NFL draft, if he lands with a Cincinnati, he lands with a Carolina, he lands with a team like that, Miami, watch out, because
Atlanta.
Man, imagine that. But
I seriously think that's where he could go. If the Atlanta sticks and pick, I don't know if they're going to pick a quarterback. There was like a rumor today that they were going to pick Trey Lance, but if they stick and pick Kyle Pitts, Jesus.
I can't see it. From an opportunity cost standpoint, you have the 4th overall pick. You can get such a haul for it if you're Atlanta. Yeah. Why would you stick and pick at that point? With that being said, Kyle Pitts would be worth it if they decided to do it. Let's go on to the number 2 tight end in the class, and that's going to be Pat Freiermuth from the Penn State Nittany Lions. I don't know if I messed that up real quick, but
Nittany Lions,
I think my tongue will slip. But the pros of this guy. If you're looking for NFL ready, you're looking for a guy that can wind up getting significant snaps right off the bat, whether you want him as a tight end 2 in your 12 personnel, whether you want him as your tight end 1, he can provide that to you. He's got absolute mitts. You mentioned nobody in this class is going to have the mitts of Kyle Pitts, 0 drops.
Yeah, anything we say about these tight ends from now on in this video, we're not comparing them to Kyle Pitts. We're comparing them amongst each other. These 2 to 5, we're comparing them amongst each other because it's not fair to compare any of them to Kyle Pitts. Continue.
Agreed. He does have mitts, not Kyle Pitts level, but 2 drops on 37 targets this year and 1 drop on 63 targets in 2019. You talk about reliability. That's what Pat Freiermuth can really offer you. And you mentioned in what exactly his role could be in the next level. He's got real good versatility. I mean, this is a guy who can contribute on all levels of the field. You need a guy in the intermediate game who can get the chains moving, who can convert a 3rd and 4 type situation. Pat Freiermuth's your guy. You need a guy in the red zone who can provide you that big touchdown. You throw it up to him. He can go up and get it. This is a guy who has conscious presence, good football IQ, and the hands that we mentioned to be able to contribute in all facets of the game right away in the NFL. And you mentioned it. Secure volume target in crucial situations. Who does that remind you of in the NFL? This is your comparison for him as well.
Yeah, I think he's a lot like Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz isn't the greatest blocker in the world, but he's physical. He gets the job done, which is also something I would say about Pat Freiermuth is that he can get the job done as a blocker. He's not the best blocker in this class, but he is definitely – it's an asset to his game. I have it listed as a strength for him. The thing I have in terms of like a con for Pat Freiermuth is he's not that dynamic, right? He's not a dynamic athlete. He's a good athlete. He's an adequate athlete for the position, but he's not – again, I'm not going to compare him to Kyle Pitts, but he's not even the athlete that these other guys like Brevin Jordan or even Hunter Long is, in my opinion. So from a ceiling perspective, a fantasy ceiling perspective, he needs a situation like Zach Ertz received, right? He needs a situation where he can become the number 1 or 2 target for an offense, be a PPR guy, be involved in the red zone, because that's basically where his value is going to come. Much like a lot of tight ends, he doesn't have the yards after catch ability to create big plays. He has some yards after catch ability to pick up first downs, but he's not going to break off a 40-yard touchdown.
Yeah, definitely. Again, you mentioned it. I actually had blocking a little bit of a con simply because I don't think he's the most physical blocker at the point of attack. However, you mentioned he is adequate enough to be used in line. He's adequate enough to be in those 12 personnel type situations. He has work to do, but overall, this is not going
He's
to be
a better
something
run
that takes
blocker
him
than
out
he is
the
a
field.
pass blocker.
Yeah.
He's like one of the better ones in the class in terms of his like PFF run blocking grade was like second best in the class. So I think run blocking, he's pretty adequate in that. I think pass blocking is where he needs some work though.
Yeah, and then again, the yards after catch is definitely a concern. Not a lot of wiggle, not a lot of creativity in the open field. But Zach Ertz, I don't even remember the last time he's actually broken a tackle, so this shouldn't be a too much of a detriment to Pat Freiermuth's game. So that being said, we can go on to number 3. The one that actually might shock people, because if you're not familiar with the film, you're not familiar with the prospects, he's not really a name that gets talked about a lot. But Hunter Long out of Boston College is an absolute stud in his own right. So take it away, Corey. This is your guy as well. Go on.
This is my tight end too. So I have him ahead of Freiermuth. And the reason I have him ahead of him is because I see a bigger ceiling with Hunter Long. And I'm not just one of these guys that chases ceiling because he's athletic or whatever, but he actually does provide a lot of the same things that Pat Freiermuth provides. He provides that sure-handed over-the-middle target that can get a lot of first downs, that can get open easily, can create after the catch and secure like an offensive possession type of role. But the thing that Hunter Long brings that Pat Freiermuth doesn't bring is he brings 87th percentile broad jump, 73rd percentile bench press, 81st percentile 40-yard dash time, 4.63, which is like a weight-adjusted speed score of above 110, because this is a dude that's 6'5", 254 pounds. So he's a prototype. He is a prototype tight end that can do it at all 3 levels of the field, and I think to a much greater extent downfield than what Pat Freiermuth can offer you. Like, because Pat Freiermuth can do some things downfield, but Hunter Long was number 4 in deep targets in this class with 10 in 2020. In 2019, he was used a little bit differently, and he had 10.8 yards after catch per reception, which was actually the best in this class if you took it just from 2019. And he had a yards per route run of 3.15 in 2019 as well, which was almost on Kyle Pitts' level this year. So this is a guy that was used not just as a possession receiver. He was used mostly in the intermediate areas of the field. And Boston College actually did a really good job of scheming him up. Those, like, if you watch Tennessee's offense, they do a really good job of this with Jonnu Smith and Ferkser, but they had him as like a fullback and they put him on like little flare routes and stuff like that, get the ball in his hands, and he was able to create after the catch. He had an average depth of target still of over 9.2 over the last 2 years on average. So this is a guy that I just see a much bigger ceiling with than Pat Freiermuth, but their grades are really close. They're probably both going to get drafted in similar areas of the NFL draft. I would imagine both of these guys are day 2 picks somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd round. It all depends kind of on landing spot, how they end up being better in the NFL. But I do think Hunter Long has a pretty significantly higher ceiling, but obviously Freiermuth has a higher floor.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just for reference, these tight end 2 to 4 range, remember, Kyle Pitts is in a different stratosphere. The tight ends 2 to 4, including the guy I'm going to mention next, are literally like inseparable for me. This will be a situation where, depending on the draft capital, depending on the landing spot, I could see any of them ending up being my tight end 2. You mentioned Hunter Long, extremely versatile piece for that Boston College offense. He reminds me of another Hunter. He reminds me of a Hunter that actually plays for the New England Patriots now, that signed with them this offseason. And that's Hunter Henry.
Yeah, athletically, they're like almost the exact same too.
Yeah, no, definitely. So with that being said, if he lands in a situation similar to what Hunter Henry got with the Chargers when he got drafted in the second round.
Hunter Henry? They have Jared Cook, who they signed on a 1-year deal. He could replace Hunter Henry. The Chargers could use another piece. Maybe they don't go like receiver at their 13th pick. They go like offensive line. Add another receiving option for Justin Herbert. I think that's a great fit. I think Hunter Long could fit in a number of different places. I think Carolina be another good fit for him.
Yes.
There's a lot of spots that this guy could fit, because I think much like Freiermuth, he's a very easy scheme fit and easy projection to the NFL because he offers everything that a tight end can offer. He's also a good blocker as well. I didn't really mention that, but he has some work to do. He's a bit raw, but like he might take a year or 2 to develop, but most tight ends do. So it's not really a knock for me.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it multiple times in our sleepers videos. Don't draft the tight ends like in redraft. Don't draft them as rookies. Maybe sometimes not even as second-year players. That 3rd year is typically when we see them fully develop and come into their prime at the position. So overall, don't be discouraged if you pick one of these guys and you see that they don't contribute right away as rookies. Because again, tight end on offense, maybe the aside from quarterback, maybe the most scrutinized position to be able to learn all aspects of it. So keep that in mind. That being said, let's go on to our number 4. a very versatile weapon out of Miami, and that's going to be Brevin Jordan. I mean, I mentioned this guy is an absolute chess piece. When chess comes to mind, think of Brevin Jordan's face, because this is a guy who lined up 61.7% of his snaps in the slot in 2020. Mentioned his functionality in an offense can be used in multiple situations. Screen game, stretched out, in line, down the field, doesn't matter. Brevin Jordan is really capable of doing it. And I mentioned his yards after catch is just ridiculous to think about. This is a guy who in the Miami offense would literally just run screens, get 10 yards after the catch, jump over someone, stiff arm someone. It doesn't matter. You're not bringing him down in the open field. That's how he was used in Miami, and that's how I can see him being used in the NFL. And this isn't a guy who's just going to be a yards after catch guy, because I do think he has adequate ball skills. He has adequate physicality at the point of attack when used in downfield situations. So to me, the reason why he's my tight end 2 currently from a fantasy perspective is because I think he's got the most versatility in his overall usage, depending on where he lands in the NFL. I think he can land in multiple spots that will be able to use him in many facets of the game. And I think he might have the most swift transition out of these guys because of that case, because he's so fluid in the open field. So I mentioned his overall pros that I have, and also not to mention he's a very willing and physical blocker, so I don't think teams are going to avoid him in line. The cons I have is that he's not extremely nuanced in his routes. He's still a little bit raw in that aspect. He's not a Kyle Pitts where he's just breaking off a slant and gaining yards after yards of separation. No,
he's shifty though. I've noticed he's pretty fluid. He's not like a stiff guy. He's like, I mean, size wise, he's like 6'3", like 245, 247. Yeah. I think he's what he's listed at. So he's a guy that he has some wiggle to him. My biggest problem with him in terms of his usage is that I think he is a very scheme-specific player. And a scheme like the Cardinals, for example, could definitely be able to utilize someone like this. To me, he's like the Rondell Moore of tight ends, because he was used a lot close to the line of scrimmage, like you mentioned. He was used a lot in the short area stuff. He only had 8 deep targets on the year, and I think he can get it done in that area. I think he's capable of doing it, but he wasn't something he was asked to do a lot at Miami. So, I mean, he seems somewhat scheme-specific. That's basically the best way I can put it.
That's fair. I was doing more of a projection when I said that he could be used down the field more. Again, like he showed on film that when he was actually tasked with those situations,
yeah, he was able to do it. He just wasn't asked to do it a lot.
Yeah, 100%. So my comp for him is honestly a guy, if you guys have watched the channel a lot, you'll know he's going to be the other Pats tight end that signed this offseason. That's going to be Jonnu Smith. And quite frankly, a situation, you mentioned the Cardinals, a situation that I think he can land perfectly with. If he got drafted by the Titans in the second round, I think he'd be a very adequate replacement for Jonnu.
Yeah, we'll just replace Hunter Long with Hunter Henry with Hunter Long and Brevin Jordan with Jonnu Smith, and we'll be good to go. I compared him to Irv Smith or even another Miami Hurricane, Jordan Reed. I think his size profile, I can't compare him to Jonnu Smith from that perspective, because I think Jonnu Smith's like 6'5", like 255. I think he's a little bit bigger than Brevin Jordan. I'm not actually sure about that. He might be a bit shorter, but Brevin Jordan, to me, he reminded me a lot of Irv Smith. That was the guy he reminded me a lot of, because the size profile, the way they were used in college, the way Alabama used Irv Smith was a lot like the way that Miami is using Brevin Jordan. So that's the similarity that I saw. You
meant Jordan Reed from Florida, right?
Oh, did I say he went to Miami? Why did I say Miami? Oh, yeah. Sure.
Miami's in Florida, so
I mean, they both produce good tight ends.
Yeah, no, same stuff.
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah, so Brevin Jordan, he's a guy that I would definitely pay attention to where he gets drafted and how early he gets drafted to. I think the 4 guys we've talked about, I think, are all locks for the top 3 rounds, in my opinion. So, and I think, honestly, the next guy that we're going to talk about has a good chance of getting into the 3rd round plus range as well, and that's Matt Bushman, tight end from BYU. He's a guy that he tore his Achilles before this season, so he wasn't able to participate in his quarterback breakout year. Yeah, because Zach Wilson was on fire this year, and he didn't have his best option as a pass catcher, because I think this guy's better than Dax Milne is, or whoever else that Zach Wilson was thrown to. But Matt Bushman ranked if you take his 2019 stats and you put him up to this year's draft class, he ranked number 5 in yards per reception at 14.6, which is like 60th plus percentile. And then if you take 2018 to 2019's numbers combined, 15.7, which was second only to Kyle Pitts. So this is a dude that was really used down the field. He was used completely in like a field stretcher, seam buster tight end role. And he was number 5 in yards per route run at 1.76. Number 2, second only to Kyle Pitts in deep production, yards, targets, touchdowns, and target percentage. And he's the only tight end in this class with 25 plus pass blocking snaps and 100% pass blocking efficiency. So to me, he has a very complete game. And I think when you look at his ability down the field, his contested catch ability, his body control, he doesn't really look like a tight end, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
When I watched him, I didn't think I was going to like him that much. I thought he was going to be okay. But when I watched him, I was like, man, this dude like has a case for tight end too. The only issues with him, obviously, he has a couple big-time red flags when you look at him, is that I don't even know how old he is, man. You can't even.
He's turning 26.
He's like 24, 25, 26. Like, I have no idea how old he is, but he said he played at 24 in 2019. So he must be 25, 26 right now.
He's going to be a 26-year-old rookie. So, again, that is the major con I have with him.
And then torn Achilles also at the beginning of the season is definitely another con.
I mean, when you talk about his game, from a pure film standpoint,
his film is the second best in the class, in my opinion.
Yes. Again, but when you balance it out with the fact that he was playing at 24, he did tear his Achilles, and quite frankly, his second contract's going to start when he's 30 years old. It's kind of scary to think about it from an NFL perspective, because while I love his game, I don't necessarily believe he's going to get the requisite draft capital to be able to push him up ahead of the top 4 guys. But in this 5 to 7 range, I absolutely am fine with taking a shot on Matt Bushman, because his film in 2019 was that impressive. You mentioned the metrics, top 5, top 2. I mean, this guy was all over the place. And I think a lot more people would be talking about him if we saw him in Zach Wilson's breakout season. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the Achilles tear it's a less of a concern for me, because he actually worked out at his pro day. About 6-7 months off of a torn Achilles. I don't know if I would have been doing that if I was him, but this is a guy that is trying to show that he's healthy. So I think he's going to get drafted somewhere in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round range. Hopefully he can get to the higher end of that, and someone really believes in him. But the age is obviously a factor. Teams are going to take that into account. But I think this is a guy. We saw Hayden Hurst at 25 go in the 1st round. So if you can get Matt Bushman, who my comparison for Matt Bushman was like Dallas Goedert, Mark Andrews. So that's like the type of film that I saw when I watched this guy. I was like, yo, this dude can play. This isn't just like a 24-year-old dominating lower competition. Like, this guy was actually like nuanced. He looked like he knew what he was doing. He looked like he was pro ready. So this is a name to keep an eye on, because I'm willing to bet this might be a guy who goes undrafted in rookie drafts, depending on the type of draft capital he gets. So keep an eye on him. He could be a taxi squad guy. You never know. But Matt Bushman, BYU tight end, he's definitely a name to keep an eye on. Real quick, before we get out of here, we're just going to mention a couple honorable mentions. Kenny Yeboah, he's a guy that has a lot of downfield production, as we were talking about. I believe yards per reception, I think he's the best in the class at almost 20 yards per reception. Doesn't have a lot of production over a long period of time, but he definitely flashed some excellence in the downfield area, which is definitely what you love to see out of tight ends. And then Tommy Tremble is another guy, real quick, I just want to mention. He's definitely the best blocking tight end in this class based on all of the metrics that you can look at. So NFL teams might value that pretty highly, and they might take him highly in the draft as a result of that. So keep an eye on Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame as well. He has a pretty kind of Pat Freiermuth-like game as well, where he's just kind of a pro-ready type tight end, kind of like a Cameron Brate. If you want to think of someone like that, he kind of just gets the job done.
Yeah, I'll quickly touch upon both of them. Kenny Yeboah was mine, and Tommy Tremble was yours. Kenny Yeboah, you mentioned the yards per reception, 19.4 this year, which is just insane. He is a guy who he's still 22, so relatively young in comparison to like a Matt Bushman. And this is a guy, in my opinion, who still has a ways to go before he's a full, complete producer at the NFL level. He's going to be a developmental guy, but he's got the requisite athleticism. He's got the requisite versatility. And as evidenced by his efficiency, he can be used in down the field situations. So if he gets drafted in that, we'll say 4th round type area to a team that's willing to put in the time, put in the work in developing him, he's got all the traits to be able to really develop into that number 1 tight end option. I mean, we saw multiple times guys at the tight end position drafted late, be put in the right situation, be put and nurtured, and have all the traits that a guy like Kenny Yeboah has, and be able to produce within 3 years. So I will absolutely be able to take a shot on Yeboah if he lands in a situation I see suitable. And he's one, quite frankly, to keep your eye on. And you mentioned Tommy Tremble. The production's not going to be there because, again, Notre Dame doesn't really feature those tight ends in recent years. I mean, Cole Kmet a little bit last year, but even his production wasn't even great last year. And we mentioned this year, Tommy Tremble was also operating behind one of the best tight end prospects or recruits we've seen in quite some time in Michael Mayer. So they were used in multiple assets of the game. I think he could get really good draft capital because we've seen multiple times in these mock draft situations, he's getting mocked as the tight end 4, tight end 5 off the board, which is usually about the 3rd round. So again, it all comes down to draft capital for these sleepers, but Yeboah and Tremble are 2 guys that really stand out to us in our opinion. So that being said, anything else you want to close off with before we head out here?
No, I'm good. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you haven't already checked out the other positional rankings, go ahead and check those out. Wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. We've already done those. We will have a number of videos centering around evaluating players and strategy and stuff like that. And then we'll also have a video going over like some of your guys' dynasty decisions from the Discord. So if you want a chance to have questions like that answered about your dynasty team specifically, we're going to go over that pretty soon. So make sure you're in the Discord and you can put in like, hey, I have the pick 103 and 105. This is my roster. What do you think I should do? And then me and Danny are going to kind of go over those hypotheticals. Not really hypotheticals, they're actual situations, but you know what I mean. So yeah. Anything else before we get out of here?
Should be good. With that being said, if you guys made it this far in the video, as always, comment protein shake because I'm rocking this every video and I like seeing you guys make it this far in the video. Anyways, peace out, y'all. Hope y'all